course, thank you very much. Rich Rubino is a political commentator and analyst. Rich, as always, welcome. Lots of questions surrounding the Haley campaign. Some believe that Nikki Haley is running for vice president because her attacks against the former president are so measured. Your thoughts on whether or not she is all in New Hampshire or all in at the VP ticket?
I think if she was running for VP, I don't think she is. She would have actually been better to have been a former governor and a former UN ambassador who's been very fidelitous to Donald Trump prior to this than somebody who actually took him on. And part of the reason I don't think that's a possibility is because she has a much more hawkish interventionist foreign policy. And specifically, Donald Trump's people would be absolutely infuriated if somebody who was more of a Bush, McCain, Mitt Romney type Republican were on the ticket. Tucker Carlson, for example, has said he wouldn't even support the ticket if Donald Trump were to pick Nikki Haley. So I don't necessarily see where the incentive is there. I think in Nikki Haley's case, when she came in, her calculation was something to the effect of Donald Trump potentially there could be indictments. There's going to be a lot of falling out from Donald Trump supporters. Perhaps this would be a race between him, Ron DeSantis. There'd be a litany of other candidates, and I'm going to be able to get to the top. I also think she probably underestimated the fact how popular Donald Trump is actually in her home state. But I don't think that she has her eyes on the vice presidentship.
Rich, as you know, one of the reasons that the former president is popular with his base is that he portrays this image of being a tough guy. For Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, for that matter, how can you portray being tough on, for instance, Vladimir Putin when you can't be tough on Donald Trump? Is that not an oxymoron when it comes to trying to run for president on the Republican ticket?
Yeah, and I think there are many supporters of both candidates saying, why don't you go all in? Ron DeSantis has been asked about it. Nikki Haley has been asked about it. It seems that the only candidates who really took on Donald Trump toe-to-toe and really went full throttle were Asa Hutchinson, Bill Hurd when he was in the race earlier, and Chris Christie, and they're all out of the race. Perhaps they see that as a formula, and they see how popular Donald Trump is, and they don't want to alienate those who potentially maybe like Donald Trump is not necessarily their first choice, but once you really go after him, there's some sort of a calculation here. But and I also think they know that if they go after Donald Trump obviously he fights back. There's a lot that goes into the calculus here, I think.
Do you think that maybe they would do better if they discussed issues? Because when I was in Iowa, one of the things that I kept hearing from so many people was that nobody is talking to me about the things that matter to me. They were talking about Donald Trump's legal problems. They were talking about whether or not Nikki Haley was an American-born citizen, which is something that Donald Trump floated, a la the birther conspiracy type of movement. But they said, nobody's talking to me about inflation, the price of eggs, the price of gas, the price of a house. Do you think they would do better if they actually spent more time talking about the issues than each other?
I think the candidates actually are doing this. And if you look at some of the town hall meetings that they're going to, the vast majority of the questions they're getting are about issues. But then a member of the press comes and they tend to ask more process type questions. I think candidates generally like to talk more about issues, not because they're necessarily passionate about them, because they have talking points about the issue. They say, this is what I'm going to do. And they talk about the history. Obviously, they talk like politicians, but I think that the candidates themselves are talking. But sometimes, it's interesting in terms of Nikki Haley, for example, when she talks about issues like Social Security. Unlike Donald Trump, she says she's actually favors raising the retirement age, which can't necessarily be particularly popular with some groups of voters in the Republican Party. Her candidacy is starting to remind me a little bit of Paul Tsongas in 1992, when he ran for the Democratic presidential nomination and talked about how we need to treat voters like adults. The problem with Paul Tsongas in that campaign is that his message certainly was superseded by Bill Clinton's more populist message. I think in this case, Nikki Haley's message is certainly being superseded by the more populist message that Donald Trump is producing.
Yeah, Tsongas saying treat the public like adults. Bill Clinton was playing the saxophone on Arsenio Hall. Rich, are there coattail concerns among the Republican ranks? The front runner is under indictment in 4 jurisdictions, and this was one of the least productive congressional sessions in history. Senate Republicans are saying take that bipartisan border deal. House Republicans are saying no border deal, no money to keep the government running. When does the cumulative effect of all of that factor into Republican voter minds and I guess cause them just to stay home?
Yes, there are 17 Republicans right now who represent congressional districts that Joe Biden won last time, plus many Republicans who represent districts that Donald Trump won marginally last time. they would much rather have Donald Trump not on the ticket, whether it's Nikki Haley or anybody else, because essentially, if I'm running against a candidate, say Mike Lawler in New York or Don Bacon in Nebraska or Mike Garcia in California, all congressmen who represent districts that Joe Biden won relatively handily last time around, I would immediately, every political advertisement I would run, I would have a picture of Donald Trump, who's unpopular in their districts, and the congressman. And then if I'm in a debate, the first question I ask when you can ask the question to the other candidate is, do you support Donald Trump as the Republican Party at the top of the ticket? And most Republicans are going to say something to the effect of, I support my party's nominee, without mentioning the person who's the nominee actually is. Now, you might get an example like Phil Scott in Vermont last time was running for governor of Vermont, and they actually asked him, do you support Joe Biden or Donald Trump? He said, I voted for Joe Biden. But Gene Taylor said the same thing about John McCain against Barack Obama, a Democrat in Mississippi. But generally speaking, these Republicans would much rather have somebody who's at least neutral on the top of the ticket.
Rich Rubino, political commentator and analyst. Rich, as always, thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you so much for having me on again.
You got it.